Let's paint some cutie fruit. I've been making cutie pie fruity pies, and every time I do, there's something so magical about the process and the results. It's much simpler than you think, and along the way, I've picked up a lot of fun mixed media techniques that I hope will inspire you to play and experiment and find your own fun ways of doing things. I'm going to share my illustration process in depth in this tutorial, so let's start. You probably have fruit lying around. A real-life subject reference sometimes is better because you can get any angle you want and you can see the textures up close, and it's fun to just draw from real life. But it's okay if you don't have any fruit, you can always use a reference. In fact, I usually do, because sometimes you can see stuff that you can't really see in real life. Like for example, I like the leaf in this picture, but my real apple doesn't have one. Whatever fruit you choose to make cute, just observe the shapes of the subject and simplify it as you draw it. The tomato is already a really simple shape, so it almost looks like a copy of it, and then bam, all you need is a simple cutie face. There's all kinds of ways of doing cutie faces, but what they all have in common is a really simple and easy with little detail. The less detail, the cuter. I watercolored it in with very few colors and added in cheeks. That's always a very important step for all my cute cuties. Notice how I lifted the color in the middle of the face for dimension and the illusion of a spear, and for the face itself to be more visible. Lighter or pastel colors are usually cuter. Now the banana is a little bit more complex, so I do an observational study sketch first. It's good to sketch your subject first to get an understanding of the shapes and forms, and then you can play with the information you gathered as you simplify. The first try at stylizing is okay. I don't really like how the heart or the face turned out, so I just try again. I morphed the shape even more to add the face in the middle, but I kept it recognizable as a banana, even though the shape is different now. Especially when I add color, it will definitely be a banana. It's a fine line between something being recognizable or not. As artists, we just have to learn how to accomplish our goals, and it's just practice and lots of tries and failures and learning, and then one day you're just like, oh, okay, I can do this, but even then you'll fail sometimes, so don't worry about it. This is why sketching can be very important, and playing with ideas and little thumbnail sketches are so great to do. Notice how I add a shadow to all my fruit. I think it gives a dimension and that extra touch. It puts it somewhere in space and makes it more realistic. Play with the way you make marks for a more fun effect. I love doing weird squiggly lines with pencil here. And if you look at all my fruit, you'll see that I usually do that. I observed the colors of the real banana and mimicked it with added cheeks and a little texture. Even though the shape is different, you can still tell it's a banana. The human brain is so good at interpreting information and making sense of it. So you can go wildly away from it and make it even purple, and we could still think it's a banana. The last one is a star fruit, which I don't have on hand, so reference is handy. Don't be afraid to use any image you find for these kinds of drawings. Our finished products look nothing like the reference, so there really should be no copyright issues. As long as you're not being realistic and you're stylizing a lot, you can always use references. So like the avocado, the star fruit looks better when it's cut open. So I just observe it and simplify it, and then add a face and simple colors, and that's it. That's really my process, really simple and easy. I also love to use colored pencils to outline my art. You can use all kinds of lines. It can be super sketchy, or they don't have to touch all the way. You can also use colored pencils to add details inside an illustration or texture. I love doing sketchy loose lines like this. It doesn't have to be anything noticeable. It can be a very similar color, but I love the texture of colored pencil. Gouache is another thing you can add on top. It's opaque, unlike watercolor, which just means you can't see through it. You can layer with it easily. This is especially useful if you make a mistake, but it's also fun just to add texture with it, or add more fun colors to outlines, or to lighten colors in some parts. Just remember, it's great for adding lighter parts, darker areas that you cannot do with watercolor alone. Or you can even use acrylic paint to do this instead. It'd be very similar. Another thing you can use is ink. If it's a dark ink like black, this really helps up the contrast. And I love to do outlines like this in some of my pieces. Experiment and see what outlines work for you. You can even leave sketchy pencil lines. Those can be fun. My favorite thing to add at the end of every piece is some white for highlights. Here I use my white gel pen like always, but you can use anything you have on hand. That's an opaque white, from acrylic, ink to gouache. The highlights really make things pop and feel magical, so I highly recommend it. Okay, so let's see all these concepts being put to use in a real illustration. I decided to paint a dragon fruit because I absolutely love them, and they're so exotic looking, so I thought it'd be fun. First, I looked for a reference. This fruit definitely looks more interesting when it's cut open. When I find one I like, I blow it up, and I'm ready to start. Now you can always start with a sketch studying the fruit, and I recommend doing so if you find it hard to break it down into simple shapes and lines in your head. It's good practice to study first. But here I go straight to sketching my cutie. Notice I'm using a super light pencil, and I just start with the overall shape, which is just an oval that's narrower at the top. And I make the other circle to show that that's just the outline, and then I go in and loosely add the details, which is the weird pointy things around it in a way that looks harmonious. I'm not copying the reference here. I'm just taking a feature from the reference and making it my own, making it look better. I think I know what looks better because I studied basic design principles because I used to want to be a graphic designer, and I know those subconsciously, so it really works out. I think every artist should learn the basics of graphic design to see what looks good, what's harmonious, because it's very much needed for any artwork you create. I think every successful artist out there uses these principles, whether they're aware of it or not. So I finish off my sketch by adding the face and how I want the seats to be and the shadow, and it's time to start outlining. My favorite way is to do colored pencil because I can make it super sketchy and use lots of different colors. I'm going off the reference here by using a similar color palette, but I made the green more minty just because I can, and it looks awesome. Always give things your own twist and don't be scared to play with color. Next, I drew in the face. Notice how simple it is. Simplicity is the key to cuteness. I also love the little textures it has because I use colored pencil and it's like waxy. It's like not like perfectly black like ink would be. I also loosely did a couple of seeds. Too much detail is the enemy of cuteness, so don't add everything you see. Pick and choose the details you add, and even then make them even simpler than the reference, and by grouping the little seeds together, it just looks more harmonious. My shadow is very scribbly again, and I add some scribbly cheeks. This is my favorite way to do them. I think it adds a really sweet texture and gradient around the cheek area, which is very noticeable because you look at the face first. I don't know, I just really think it's cute. Okay, so I'm done outlining. I love doing colored pencil first because I can easily erase my pencil sketch marks underneath it, and now they won't show up when I watercolor, because if you watercolor over erasable pencil, you make it unerasable. So our sketch looks as if like I had a perfect outline from the get-go. This is the same thing I do with ink. I like to ink after I do my pencil sketch and then erase the pencil, so it looks like a perfect outline. Now it's time to watercolor. I do it like I always do it, very loose and quick. You can go outside the lines or inside on purpose, or just be more loose like with your hand. I think that gives it a fun look. Have your first layer be the lightest and then work your way up with shading when working with watercolor, because you can always go darker but never lighter, unlike gouache. I add a slight splatter by tapping the brush with my finger, and I make the fleshy part darker, but I notice how I left around the cheeks the lighter color. I just want it to look lighter. And I add some more darker green to the tips as well to make a subtle gradient. Notice how loose I am, and I let the paint touch while it's wet for fun effects. I also use different variations of pink and green with each layer for more depth and color play, and you can use lots of colors in the same layer. I love doing this a lot. You can really see the subtle differences, but they're so subtle that it doesn't take away from the piece. I then decided to use the gray pencil to add some more seats to make it look like they're inside the flesh for an illusion of depth. The last layer is gouache. I don't feel like the piece really needed it, but I decided to add some anyway just to show you guys that you can. Notice how I used similar colors to add slight textures, and then I made the cheeks even pinker with it. I really like the pink that I have from Arteza, I think. It's like really, really bright. I love using gouache for texture or splashes of color that are more uniform than watercolor. It just doesn't have that texture of watercolor if you use it opaquely. It's good to know how all your mediums act and react with each other, and that way you'll just, without thinking about it, put them together. But it takes time, so just take out your supplies and play with them. I need to do that with my crayons. I haven't been using those. I want to try incorporating that more. Anyway, I decided to throw in some texture with a very light pencil using fun scribbles as well. You can do this at any time. Just make sure your paint is dry first, and it will even show up using lighter pencil colors on top of darker paint. You just have to have high quality wax pencils like the Prismacolors. I also wanted to add my signature dreamy background, so I used plain water to wet the page so we can do wet on wet techniques. I just drop in the same colors already used in the piece, and if I don't like how it looks, I just use a paper towel or empty brush to pick up excess paint. It's called a thirsty brush because it's like it absorbs water. Don't overdo it because we want the background to remain light, so just don't have too much color in it. Make it lighter than the foreground, which is our dragon fruit. Once it looks good to you, just add a simple splatter again if you like. Notice how I covered up the part I don't want splatter on with my paper towel. Also note that the more dry your background is, the more the splatter will be visible and will not just disintegrate into the water. If it's too wet, it'll just disperse. But just give it a minute to dry more, and then it'll disperse less. You can kind of tell later on how wet your paper is and how much the paint will move. Just practice. Practice, 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 practice. Okay, so I fixed up the background to my liking again, and then use a little bit more colored pencil to add even more detail. Notice how I switch up my tools as I go along. You can easily do this as long as the part you're working on is dry. If you're using a dry medium on top, just pay attention to what you have and how they work together. Like I said before, that's really, really important. And then you don't have to think about it. You just do it. My last tool to use is the white gel pen. I love this thing. I'll leave links to all the supplies below, but I use it to add little dots and highlights like in all my pieces. Notice how the cheeks transform with them. The eyes are also optional, but I felt like it'd look better without highlights this time. I like to, do it sometimes, but not all the time. You can just tell. Anyway, but you can always try it, and you can always erase it by just adding some water to the gel pen, and it'll disintegrate with a paper towel and water. So yeah, just don't be scared to try. I use some darker pencils to darken the outside outline even more for a sticker look, which that's what I call it, but it really is just adding more contrast with the background. And then I also use the white gel pen one more time to make a slight white line around the whole fruit itself to make the contrast even higher. I really like adding more contrast because it just makes it pop. And with a couple more highlights, I think I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. I hope watching my process helped you understand some of my favorite techniques and how I make my super cutie fruits and inspire you to give it a try and to play with different mediums. I love mixing things like this on the page. It just gives it so much life. So your assignment, if you choose to try it, if you choose to have this quest, is to do this with your favorite fruit. Or you can pick a fruit that you don't think is cute at all, like, I don't know, durian or something. Durian? I don't know what it's called, but it's like, is that the smelly one? I don't know. Whatever fruit you don't like, you could try to give yourself extra challenge or do both. You could do a cute one and an uncute one. But anyway, give it a go. Mix it up with your own style and see what you come up with. Experiment like I do. I'm sure you'll find ways of doing things that nobody else uses. Well, it's more like you'll just find new ways of doing things that other people do, but like your way. Let me know what your favorite fruit is in the comments. I personally have too many favorites. Dragon fruit, but it's like never in season. They're so expensive. Anyway, avocados are amazing. They're fruit. Yes, I Googled it. Blueberries. I love blueberries. Persimmon. Persimmon are so like weird looking. And I don't even know if I'm saying it right, persimmon. But anyway, they're just, I don't know, they're like fleshy, but they're so good. If you want to learn more about making things cutie, you guys can check out my You Can Draw Cute Animals or Cute Food classes. I'll leave links down below. And I also have classes on how to draw anything, watercolor, gouache, and thumbnail sketching, all kinds of stuff that might help you with this stuff. And free tutorials on YouTube, so subscribe and like so other people can find this. I would appreciate that. So never stop learning and growing, you guys, and I hope you had fun with this cutie fruit journey with me. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Hopefully I'll be making them more frequently. Wish me luck. Bye. All the best to all of you. Oh, and tag me on Instagram if you make a cutie fruit. I will see it and comment on it and like it because I want to see what you guys create. So yeah, tag me. Okay, bye guys.